Internet. This is my first time ever making one of these videos. I don't know how to edit. I don't know any of the technical stuff, so do bear with me. It might be a little rough. But I want to try. So here we go. Video log number 1. My name is Chantel. I live in central Canada, and I was a foster kid. I came from a very, very dysfunctional family. So much alcoholism, abuse, broken everything. And as a teenager, then being angry, not really understanding, I ended up living with several friends and a couple of foster homes as well. In the last little while, I've realized that not a lot of people are comfortable sharing their stories until somebody else kind of goes first and gives them space to do that. So as I've grown older and become a little more comfortable with my own story and started processing some of my own feelings about the things that I went through, I thought maybe I can offer that space, and the internet is a great tool, so here I am. I guess for this first video, I'll just do the very tip of the iceberg of my own story, and then from there, if there's something that inspires me or a topic that comes up that's really on my mind, I might speak to that in future videos. And also, if you guys, would like to share your experiences or ask me to speak to different things, any questions you might have, I'll do my best. Disclaimer, I'm not a trained psychologist or a counselor or anything, but I've been there and maybe my experiences can help you out. So here we go. I grew up in a little town in Saskatchewan, Canada, and there's about 10,000 people, so some people will call it a city, others would call it a town. And my family was very, very dysfunctional. Alcohol, abuse, neglect, broken everything. My mom had been pregnant a couple times before. This is a story that I've gotten anyway. She's never told me herself, and had several abortions. And then when it came to me, the doctor had given her some medical advice that it wasn't wise to have another one, and so here I am. However, she was not really equipped, for whatever reason, whether mental illness or alcohol or whatnot, to take care of me. So as a young baby, I was passed around between different homes, and to the point that, she wouldn't come pick me up and social services was called. Now, my aunt and uncle tried to step in and adopt me at that point. However, my uncle is very, very abusive, violently abusive, physically and I presume sexually from some of the things I've heard. And so my grandparents stepped in and kind of broke that chain from happening, thankfully. Now, they had their own issues, and I'll probably speak to that in another video, but they stopped me from going to live with my abusive uncle, for which I am forever grateful. They didn't have a lot of money. My grandpa was also a very heavy drinker. My grandma started to suffer from dementia and Alzheimer's when I was, 12 or 13, something like that. So there was a lot of neglect, a lot of verbal abuse when my grandpa was drinking. And basically, I kind of raised myself till the age of 12 or 13. Hitting those teenage years, I was very angry, because I saw other kids, they wanted to join a sport or do whatever, their parents just paid for it, no big deal. They didn't have to come home and make their own food. They didn't have to go to the grocery store and scrounge for coins to come up with enough to make some kind of meal. The basics were provided, and I started to realize, that I didn't have those things. Because when you grow up, in an enclosed environment, you don't realize where you're at, or the basic rights that you should have. So I'd gone without for a very long time. And coming to that realization, I started to get angry. Why don't I have these things? Other parents don't yell at their kids. I don't. Now I'm getting emotional. But anyway, I became aware of that, and I started to lash out and become kind of difficult to deal with, in all honesty. Thankfully, I had some fantastic teachers that gave me some outlets, and I started participating heavily in music and band, also later on in badminton. And that really gave me a reason to not look for things like alcohol myself. At one point, I started staying over at my friend's house. And first it was, just the odd weekend here and there. Then it became 3 or 4 nights. And then I just didn't go home. I was scared to go home. I didn't want to get yelled at. I didn't want to, be hungry, all that. And it got to the point where her parents called social services. And from there, I ended up moving several times to live with, a teacher friend, to live in a couple of foster homes, to live with my brother's dad. And eventually, I went back into my grandparents' home because it was better than some of those experiences. And at least I had a little bit of control over my life. In further videos, I can explore that in more depth. But again, tip of the iceberg, what I want to tell you guys. So when I moved back, that was when Grandma's dementia had gotten to the point where she couldn't care for herself anymore. And my aunt and uncle, the abusive one, started to step in, and there were some very scary moments where he came after me. And I was pretty smart. I am very, very thankful because I would pick up on, a phone call or a certain air vibe in the house that, maybe it's one of those days where he's going to come over. And I would always position myself somewhere in the room where I had an exit. So for that reason, I never faced any sexual abuse because I didn't allow myself to be cornered. So I'm so thankful for that. But he did come after me several times. And I slept in snowbanks under the deck. I ran to my brother's dad's house, which wasn't too far away at the time, at 3 a.m. or something to get away from him. And at that point, too, my grandpa's drinking got heavier because he was trying to deal with some of this. And he was a marine mechanic, so he fixed boats and stuff. And he ended up getting a chemical in his eye, which left him blind in one eye. And then he wasn't able to work anymore. So he went from being very, very low income to even more low income, very poor. And he went up north to work with my uncle for a while. And that left me alone in the house with my grandmother, who was suffering from dementia. Eventually, she went into a care home. And then when my grandpa was away, I was left alone all by myself. And throughout this time, I had been talking to social workers, but it was one of those who would you believe situations. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Easy A, but there's a scene where the main character is speaking to the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor has done something really negative. And then, the younger child has a chance to out her on it. But she goes into, oh, well, who would you believe? Who would you believe? And then a very professional adult voice, like 2 faces. And so when the social worker would come and talk to my uncle or my grandfather or any of these people, they would give the very professional, oh, she's just a teenager, she's upset about something, or she didn't get what she wanted, so she's just acting out. I promise there's nothing bad going on. And unfortunately, in many cases, that trumped my word. So I felt that the social worker was not on my side most of the time. I don't know what her perspective was, but I tried it several different times. I even brought in one of my friend's moms to sit in on a session with her to say, like, you are misrepresenting me. I'm going through this. You're not helping. You're, reading into this the wrong way, not what I'm telling you. And I remember while I was still in the room that my friend's mom and the social worker had a conversation right there of, oh, she's just venting. She's upset. It's what she does. And I can't tell you the frustration I felt and not being heard for the abuse and the neglect and things that I was going through. the only thing that really kept me going was, again, those fantastic teachers that helped me with music and band and biology as well. So anyway, I could not wait to get out of that town. And I was quite smart, like I had mentioned before, so I was insistent on going to university. I got student loans. I still have a mountain of student loans to pay off, but they allowed me to get out. So I moved about 150 kilometers away to the nearest city that had a proper university, and I started school. And I only took really what I needed, like a few books, a few clothes, my bed. 3 months later, my grandfather passed away. Now, as much as there was negativity with the drinking and the neglect and the verbal abuse from him, he was my only parental figure. So losing him, I was just 19 when I had just moved out to go to university, was crushing. That was really my only parental figure. And, well, the funeral was really difficult because my aunts and uncles and those type of people locked me out of my house. They gave me one night with a great aunt to go in and sort through all my stuff and take what I wanted. Something that was very important to me was my grandfather's coin collection, and I had made one as well. And they went through it, and they took anything of obvious value before they let me have it. They threw out piles of my artwork. They threw out basically almost all of my belongings, except for the few things I saved that one night. And keep in mind, too, that one night, obviously I'm crushed. So I'm not thinking super clearly, and I didn't make the best decisions necessarily for the things that I wanted to keep. And also I didn't really get a chance to say goodbye to the house. I was locked out. And then at the funeral itself, I knew the minister because she had officiated at my great-grandma's funeral. So I had asked her if I could be in the family car. And she recognized how important my grandfather was to me. Basically, he is my father. So she said yes. So I was sitting in the car, leaving from the funeral to the graveyard. My mother is in the front passenger seat ahead of me. I'd only seen her maybe once every 4 or 5 years growing up, even though she only lived 10 blocks away. She turns around, says to my uncle who's sitting behind me, "Why is she in this car? It's not like she was his daughter." You believe that? My mother, who, for all intents and purposes, abandoned me and really had nothing to do with my life through all of the abuse and stuff suffered through my grandfather and my uncles in foster care. She didn't understand why I wanted to be in that family car. So at that point, going back to school, again, 150 or so kilometers away, I made a decision, and that was that I didn't want to be like them. I wanted to be healthy, and that meant not drinking. I wanted to be educated. I wanted to have a job that didn't need to be rich. I just wanted to be able to pay my bills. And that if at some point in the future I decided to have my own family, I would protect them at all costs from the dysfunction, the hurt, and the abuse that I had suffered. So I cut all of them out of my life. And of course, there were a lot of hurt feelings there. A lot. They didn't understand this at all. We had never gotten along particularly, but to make such a drastic, absolutely cut off, like change my number, didn't tell anybody where I lived, changed my email, stopped replying to things. That was pretty drastic, and they had a lot of feelings of, oh, she's too good for us, all of this, that I felt really guilty about for a long time, and I'm just starting to kind of reconcile now. But I am so thankful that I did that. I really needed that clean break. And it wasn't easy. I mean, every time there's a holiday, people ask you, oh, did you go home? Christmas, what did your parents buy you? I don't have parents. Do I want to tell them that whole story? All of that is just, that's a subject for another video. And the finances as well. Typically when you move to university, parents, if they can, they give you a care package, or at the very least, they let you stay at home over the holidays for free and to feed you, and, a little bit of money when you're broke. Nothing. Just student loans. I ended up working 3 jobs, sometimes 4, to help put me through university, which is, again, another topic that can be discussed later. Because it's not easy to study when you're working that much. And it's not easy to do as well as your peers who don't have to work. And the scholarships are based on grades, not on work ethic, right? But I did it. And I got to the other side. And I was very determined to be normal. I don't want people to look at me different. Because the social worker even had kind of written me off and labeled me as a hopeless case. I remember one time I was asking for a little bit of money towards a band trip. And her advice was, well, maybe you should quit band and get a job at A&W. Yeah, exactly. I didn't want people to know what I had gone through. And sometimes I didn't understand it myself. I didn't really understand why it was hard for me to trust people. I didn't understand, normal family customs. So when I started dating, meeting people's families, I didn't know fully how to interact with them in a healthy way. Or my expectations were different from what most people would see. And that's, again, it's a ripple effect, right? So there were so many different things that come from what you face when you're younger. And people don't talk about it. They really don't talk about it. And it's hard, as you can tell, I'm quite emotional. Even now, having explored a lot of this and done a lot of self-work, to talk about it publicly. But that's a shame. And I want to maybe change that, if I can, in a small way. So, yeah, like I said, I'm going to try and put out a few of these videos. Try for once a week-ish, depending on my work schedule and how exhausted I am. And just to show people that it's okay to share. Because through sharing, we can heal these wounds. Through sharing, we can prevent these family trajectories or patterns from continuing. We can actually make a difference and be healthy so that we can help others. So, I love you all, internet people. Thank you for listening. And yeah, until the next video. Peace.